folks, my name is Jen, and today we're just gonna take a moment. How you doing? You doing good? I don't know how the fuck I'm doing. It is now mid-March, which feels really weird to say. Like, I legitimately cannot believe that we're here already. This year so far has felt like about 5 years, and also like no time has gone by at all. It's quite insane. Today I have for you my February reading wrap up. I think I said in my last wrap up that I was gonna maybe at the end of seasons, at the end of my seasonal, at the end of that I was gonna start doing some just mini stats, basically to catch you up on how I did on what I wanted to get read. I just do like a little check-in on that over the past like season. So first up, regarding my TBR, how did I stick to my TBR? Did I at all read a whole bunch of books over the past 3 months? It looks like in my winter TBR video I did back at the beginning of like December, I had said I wanted to read basically like something like 28 books, either that I wanted to read or that I wanted to like finish because I was currently reading them and everything. How successful was I out of those 28 books? Out of those 28, I read 12 of them, which maybe doesn't seem like a lot, but you know what? At least I checked 12 of them off of my list, so there we go. As far as like my specific things worked out, for classics, first of all, did I read a classic every month? Yes, I did actually. In December, my classic, it wasn't a new classic that I read. I read Christmas Carol for the 5 millionth time, basically. In January, I actually read 2 classics. I read Timequake, and I also finished reading The Moonstone. And then in February, you will see my classic that I managed to finish. Nonfiction, December and February, I did not read nonfiction in either of those months. So, I made progress in a nonfiction book in February, but I did not actually finish reading it. In January, I did read a nonfiction book, and I finished reading Good Stuff, which I reviewed last time. Let's see, my Nightstand of Shame books. In December, I finished reading Time Cat, which I had on my shelf somehow. It's a middle grade book. Not that long, but it took me forever to get through it. But I finished that in December. I did not read any Nightstand of Shame books in January, unless you kind of count Moonstone, because I set it aside for like a month or so to read other things and then came back to it, but I'm not really counting that. And February, I'm kind of counting it because there was a book that I started months ago and then had set down and not finished reading and then came back to it, which I will talk about, but yeah, kind of counting that. And then as far as like the banned book challenge, reading challenge goes, December I was not doing that because it's started in January. So that doesn't count. But so far, January, I read 3 books and checked them off of the list. And February, I read my 1 book for the month. We are now halfway through March, by the way, and I have not finished that book. I really need to get on that. But this month, boy howdy, I don't know what this month reading wrap up is gonna look like eventually, because I haven't been doing that much reading, to be completely honest. That's basically how we do for winter. Now we can talk about books. Did I DNF any books? No, I did not. Books that I partially read. I started yeah, I guess I started in February. I started rereading Mr. Mercedes just because I wanted something that I could bring to read at lunch, and I didn't want to bring any of the other books that I actually had on my TBR. Why? I don't know. But I started reading Mr. Mercedes, and I am still rereading it. It's a reread. I did want to fit in a reread of the trilogy at some point this year anyway, because I have Holly, which is the offshoot of it, unread on my shelves, so it's working towards that goal pretty much. So yeah, got partway through that. Got partway through Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. That one I've been kind of taking my time with. And let's see what else. Did I look? I still have Nicholas Nickleby sitting by the... I do not have that many chapters left. I just really started dragging my feet on it, and I don't know, guys. I honestly have been in a weird place as far as reading and spending my time lately. But yeah, didn't get really any of that done. Oh, I started my classic for March, actually, towards the end of February. And that's the one that I haven't finished reading yet. It's Lady Chatterley's Lover, but I really need to get finished with that. So, but that's this March Gen's problem. So we'll talk about March Gen's problem around April when we're talking my wrap up. And oh, I also started an audiobook of Frankenstein because I decided I wanted to give that another chance, and the audiobook really helped me get through it, but I have not finished listening to it because, again, weird place. I haven't been listening to audiobooks. I've been listening to mostly music, so anyway, the books that I actually did read in February. We shall start first, I think, here. So I read one classic, and it also was one of the books for the banned book challenge as well. And that is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I actually read this years ago. I think I was like 15 or 16 years old when I read this the first time. This is the movie tie-in cover, and it also, I mean, you can see that on the back. It's got like the movie credit things. And this was to fulfill the challenge of a banned book that has had a adaptation. At this point, I think it's had 2 adaptations because the original movie, which I don't think I've seen, I think I've seen part of it, I haven't seen all of it. I know it has Danny Glover and, who is it? Whoopi Goldberg, right? Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg is in it. So there's that version from like the 80s, I believe. And then there's the latest version that came out, which is based off of, I think, a musical that they created about it. Right? I have not seen that either, but I do want to track down at least one of those adaptations and watch them. This book, oh boy, it's rough. So this is about a woman named Celie. This is actually told from her point of view of her letters to, at first, God, and then eventually she starts writing to her younger sister. Man, this book starts off rough. Celie has not had an easy time of it. The book basically, I'm not spoiling anything, by the way. The book basically opens with her starting to write these letters to God, basically, because things have gotten so hard for her to deal with mentally and emotionally. Her mom is very sick and is not accepting attentions of her father, so her father ends up turning his attentions onto her. And not great. She becomes pregnant a couple of times. It's not a good situation. And yeah, mother dies and she ends up getting like forcibly married off to this guy who didn't really want her. He wanted her younger sister. And and then she proceeds to get, you know, also abused by this man and his children. This, I'm not giving any spoilers away. This is within the first, like, couple of chapters of this book, or rather the couple of letters of this book. And this is basically following her life. There's giant time skips over time from she's a young girl dealing with this, then she's a young woman dealing with this, and like time is passing by fairly quickly, characters are getting introduced, and you're seeing a lot of her. She's like talking about things, but she's almost being nonchalant about a lot of things that are happening, and it's like, oh, it's because she's kind of emotionally shutting down due to like the trauma of things that have happened to her. And you're getting this story of her life with these giant time skips until you reach a point where her shitty abusive husband has now brought in this woman who is sick to take care of her for a while, and this is the woman that he had wanted to marry when he was younger, but was not allowed to because his parents. And her and Celie strike up a friendship that, you know, over time becomes a little bit more than friendship. So this is like Celie's life. It's her life and trying to carve out some form of happiness despite all of the terrible things that have happened to her over the course of her life. And it's really about like, it's not just about her. There's a lot of other characters involved, and them also trying to find some semblance of like happiness despite of their circumstances and society. And this is taking place, I should know when it's taking place, but I could not exactly tell you. I think it's in the 20s or 30s, I believe, because jazz is like very prevalent in a chunk of this, all regarding that. And it's also about the bond between her and her younger sister over the course of these years as well. You also get some perspective from her younger sister, who has gone like had a completely different kind of trajectory. Man, this book is fucking rough, and I feel like, I don't know if, because rereading this, I had forgotten the majority of what this book was about. I had remembered a couple of key details, mostly the beginning, and then a little bit about Celie and Shug, who is her love interest, but like I didn't remember like whole chunks of this book. There's a whole section that is about mission trip to like Africa. Did not remember that at all. Just giant swaths of this that I did not remember. And I don't know if that's just because it's like so long ago, or if it's because that as a teenager I was so upset by a lot of stuff in here that I just kind of like blocked out most of it. I have to say I don't know if I could really say that I 100% enjoy this novel, because a lot of the contents are quite upsetting, especially in like the beginning, but I really love the ending. Oh my god, the ending made me fucking ugly cry, and I was just so overall invested in these characters and well, I wasn't exactly rooting for a couple of them. I was definitely 100% rooting for Celie, and just so invested in this story and hoping for the best come the ending, because like I said, I totally forgot large chunks of this. There are some truly beautiful passages in here. I think I like, I can't tell, this is a very old copy, but You can tell I kind of folded some pages down, and that's because there was either something that just like made me laugh or took my breath away or just felt like really profound. And I kind of had to mark those passages because I was like, damn, this is crazy. A lot of this so beautiful, so brilliant. There's also a whole section of this. I don't want to get into the full circumstances because they're like spoilers for major parts of the book and everything, but Celie this whole time has pretty much been writing letters to God. That's where all of these things are, is her just writing letters. Whether physically or mentally, I can't quite remember. But she is writing them, and she reaches a point where things happen and she just questions what's the fucking point of it all anyway. Then Shug and her end up having like a little heart-to-heart about it, and Shug starts talking about how she views God. And it's just a very interesting discussion to be had in this book, and it's not one that I was entirely expecting because, again, I forgot most of this book from when I read it when I was younger, and so I was just not expecting this at all. I was also not expecting to be like, yeah, this is probably the closest to how I feel about a spirituality that I have randomly read in a book before, and it was just very interesting. Here's the thing I believe. God is inside you and inside everybody else. You come into the world with God, but only them that search for it inside find it, and sometimes it just manifests itself even if you're not looking or don't know what you're looking for. Everything that is or ever was or ever will be, and when you find that, be happy to feel that you found it. It's not a he or a she, it's an it. Like the traditional view of God was the old white man. She says, my first step from the old white man was trees, then air, then birds, then other people. But one day when I was sitting quiet and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me. That feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed, and I laughed and I cried and I run all around the house. I knew just what it was. In fact, when it happened, you can't miss it. And then she kind of talks about sex. So she kind of references it to like sex. And it's like, oh, God love all them feelings. Some of the best stuff God did. And he's just like, yeah, it's just this whole discussion about feeling like that. Like it's not what people tell you about things. It's not what is drilled into your head when you're younger. It's this profound moment of just kind of accepting you are one with the universe. Maybe there is something, but it's like everything is with, I don't know. And it blows my mind that I read this book as like a 15, 16-year-old and I totally forgot that part of it. And I don't know how I possibly could, because that is the closest view to how I felt about things since I was a kid and really stubborn and not listening to what everybody is drilling into your head when you're a kid and going to organized religion. And it's crazy to me that I totally, completely forgot that part or at all, because it is the closest that I've seen in a book that's not specifically about, like, it's not like nonfiction about like spirituality or something like that. It's the closest I've ever seen in a fictional novel to how I also kind of feel about things and see things. So it's just like an extra element to this book and an extra interesting thing to see within it that kind of hit me in a certain way while I was reading this. But yeah, I don't know, that's a side tangent, I guess. But this, which is an interesting juxtaposition to Celia's sister, who had gone on a mission trip, like a pastor and his wife, to Africa to preach to people and try to bring them supplies and stuff like that. So it's kind of like an interesting juxtaposition of religious ideas and discussion about faith and belief, and how that relates with how society treats people, especially white society treating any marginalized folks especially during this time period. So it's just very like an added element of like an interesting discussion being had in this book as well. But yeah, it's an intense book, but it's one of those that, well, I don't think it's going to be one that I reread very soon again. It is one that I do plan on rereading within a few years, just to see if there's anything else I pick up out of it. Again, if there's any different ways I feel about it. Then, as opposed to, like I said, I read this the first time when I was like 15 or 16 and I forgot most of it, so I'm interested to see how another like 5 or 10 years, if I reread this, if anything has changed, or if I pick up on more, or if I notice anything else within this. But there's some things in here that I'm like, yeah, I could see that's probably why assholes are banning it, and only one of them is that discussion on God. There's some other elements to this as well that's probably like, whiny bullshit. People ban books, whine fucking assholes. I'm sorry, I'm gonna move on before I can get madder at the state of everything. This is a beautiful book. It's also a hard book, so just upsetting in different parts. So if there's anything that's particularly triggering to you, just maybe like check that out before you pick it up. But I think you should, because it is very beautifully written, and it has a lot to say. I gave this 4 stars. Next up, I read 3 mystery novels. The first of which was The Thin Man by Dashiell Hammett. This was also a reread. This was the book I was talking about where I started it. It's like I don't know. It was like a before bedtime read that I started several months ago, and then put it aside because then I got distracted. But yeah, I finished reading it. So this is about Nick and Nora Charles. Nick used to be a kind of like detective, private eye guy. But he's been out of the game for a long time. He got married to Nora, and she comes from like a wealthy family, so he's been kind of out of things. I believe this takes place in like New York City. And on the West Coast, he's been helping run her family's like business. I could not tell you what her family's into. I can't remember, but he's been helping kind of run that. And they have come back to New York for reasons. And they are cheerfully drinking their way through speakeasies, because this is still, I believe, taking place during Prohibition, or maybe towards the end of Prohibition. So speakeasies galore. And he ends up getting pulled into something because this young woman approaches him at this speakeasy and is like, hey, I remember you used to work for my dad. And her father was like this scientist, inventor dude. And he's been kind of out of her and her brother and mother's lives for a while. And then as Nick kind of gets pulled in personally with just kind of like, oh, hey, how you doing? Yeah, what's up with your dad kind of thing. A murder also occurs. and he gets pulled in a little bit further. And of course the police are involved, and the police are like, are you in the game? Are you not in the game? And he's very much like, I'm out of things. I'm just kind of like here. But meanwhile, he's still like sort of snooping around, and meanwhile getting totally fucking blisteringly drunk every night. I This book is interesting, I will say. It is very much a vintage mystery. In the way that, how do I want to say this? It is not an Agatha Christie. I will tell you that. It is not a Golden Age Agatha Christie novel. It is nothing like that. I feel like Dashiell Hammett writes, and mind you, I have only read The Thin Man. I do have The Maltese Falcon on my shelf. I just haven't picked it up yet. This reads a lot like Raymond Chandler, which I'm honestly kind of wondering if that's just how male detective writers wrote at the time when this book came out. The kind of hard-boiled detective idea, the way things are worded, how chapters kind of work, how the ending kind of worked. Everything is very, it doesn't fully play by the rules. You're getting information, but you're not really, it doesn't really feel like you're getting as many clues and able to follow along a path with the clues to come to your own conclusions and stuff like that, like you would with a typical, like, yeah, like Agatha Christie or a Dorothy L. Sayers or something like that. You're not getting those little helpful clues. You're kind of like, just, now he's here getting drunk, now he's here talking to a police officer, now he's here getting drunk at this other thing, now he's bantering with his wife. Like, it's jumping around. Nick Charles is keeping things kind of close to his chest a little bit, and you're only really hearing conclusions later, and even then, if he's like telling somebody that this is what he thinks, it sounds like that's what he thinks, but it might not actually be what he thinks, because then he'll contradict himself in the next chapter when he's talking to somebody else or he's ruminating on something. And it's honestly, while I did like a lot of this book, because Dashiell Hammett also has this very quick kind of wit, a lot of this as well, and like there's just some kind of things that like Nick will say or do or whatever that's just kind of a little bit funny. It might take you a second pass to be like, wait, what was going on there? Oh, you know, I feel like I'm not describing this correctly. It's just this book feels like it needs to be, as kind of like pulpy as it is, it feels like you need to read it very slowly and carefully, because there's a lot of different things happening in here, but you can't always rely on what is being said at that time, because it might just be the character lying because reasons. That kind of thing. I really like the relationship between Nick and Nora. I think they are a delight. There was one particular scene that I wasn't 100% on board with, and I think that was one of a couple of things that severely makes this book very dated. But again, it is a vintage mystery. It is from, when was this published? 1933. Things are going to be dated anyway. Like I said, some parts I did find to be funny. I did like the detective stuff. When he is actually detecting, I liked the banter with him and others, especially with him and Nora. And the ending was just kind of anticlimactic and a little bit info-dumpy, which is an unfortunate thing that happens a lot, I think, in some of these older novels. Like, I guess you could argue that when Agatha Christie has, like, Poirot doing his ending, like, I've gathered you all here to blah, 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 you could argue that that's a little bit info-dumpy too, but that's, like, it's sharing conclusions, it's coming to things. This was very much like, hey, this and this happened, let me just fucking like, have some exposition here. I just tell you exactly what happened, read it back to you, all these things that happened off screen that I'm now relating to you as I drink again for the 20th time in this novel. It's I don't know. I know that this was like a thing at the time, was this kind of anticlimactic, yeah, let's go back over it kind of like thing. But it's honestly not my favorite way of ending a detective novel, to be completely honest. Interesting book of its time. I love the characters that he created here because I adore the Thin Man movies with Myrna Loy and William Powell. I think those two took these characters and ran with them. I think they represent them beautifully. Those movies, I feel, are one of those cases in which the movie probably is better than the book. I definitely have enjoyed the original movie way more than I have enjoyed the 2 times that I've now read this book, to be completely honest. They made those characters their own, and they made them even funnier and more charming and utterly ridiculous, but that's probably because Myrna Loy and William Powell had wonderful chemistry together, and William Powell is a fucking hoot in anything that man was in. Like I said, one of those rare cases in which I think the movies are probably better than the book, because I enjoy the movie versions of them a little bit better than I do in the book itself. I just feel like they're even more charming and endearing and fleshed out more. That might be controversial, I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, it was alright. Probably not one of my favorites, but I do still need to read The Maltese Falcon, and I know they also made a movie out of that one too, so I don't know. But this was like 3 stars. Speaking of Agatha Christie, next mystery I read, also reread, was Murder on the Orient Express. This is, I think, if it's not the most popular novel of hers, it's one of the most popular novels of hers. It features her Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot has been overseas, Hercule Poirot has been elsewhere, helping an old friend out, solving intense case. He is on his way home because he's been summoned by like a telegram of, hey, developments are happening. So he is rushing to get back to England, and he ends up boarding the Orient Express, which is this train that is going through the mountains, and unfortunately the train gets snowbound at one point, and when they wake up the next morning, they find that a man has been murdered, and it's basically like a locked room kind of mystery because his room was locked. Is on board a snowbound train, and every single person, well, not every single person on the train, because there's like a whole other section of the train that is not involved, but every single person in this particular like express car is now a suspect. So fun. My favorite mystery trope, basically, of everyone at this particular place is now a suspect. Oh, it's my favorite. I love this shit. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this because this and another book I'm going to talk about are going to be part of a video that I do discussing them a little more in depth. So yeah, I don't want to spend like a ton of time talking about this because you're just going to hear more about this either this month or honestly more likely April. But yeah. Anyway, this is my favorite Agatha Christie novel. I adore this book, and I have loved this book since I was like, how old was I when I read this? 13, 14, I want to say. I mean, it's a murder mystery with my favorite murder mystery tropes of it being locked room and everyone who's on the property is a suspect. And it also takes place on a train. I freaking love trains as Hercule Poirot. So, I mean, you can't go wrong here. I find this to be an absolutely brilliant mystery, and I will not hear any shit talked about this fucking mystery at all. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love the careful attention to detail, the little bits of like humor and social commentary and things that have kind of been thrown in. It is another vintage mystery, so there are a couple of elements that are like, ooh, that don't sound great. But then when you're like looking at it, it's like, is she making this commentary as like tongue of cheek though? Is that potentially it? It's sometimes it's hard to tell in her novels if she's making this commentary as like a tongue-in-cheek poking fun at like British attitudes about things, or if it's like a legit something that's being I don't want to get too in-depth in it, but it's something that I find kind of hard to tell sometimes in her books if she's like being particularly self-deprecating or trying to make some kind of social commentary or not. There's a real amount of heart that is in this book as well, and probably something that sounds weird to say about like a Agatha Christie murder mystery, but this one has some quite honestly has some serious heart to it. There's some serious like feelings in this book that made me strangely emotional this time around reading it. Maybe it's because I was reading it a little more closely than I normally do. And yeah, I annotated it. This book, like, it blew my freaking socks off when I was a teen, like the ending especially. And it is something that I enjoy. The conclusions come to in here are just, yeah, very very different than a lot of her other mysteries, very different than any other mystery I'd read at that point, and something that I remember just coming back to and thinking about a lot when I was a teenager. And I also really liked that doing this in-depth kind of analyzation of it, I feel like I learned a little bit more about writing mysteries and a little bit more about how Agatha Christie wrote her mysteries, how she kind of formed them. And as a couple of my writing projects are mysteries, it honestly has been really helpful to do more an in-depth kind of reading and looking at this book in general, because I picked up on those little subtle elements, those tiny little things where it's like, if you're just kind of reading it, it's just like there. But when you're doing a more close reading of it and you're paying more careful attention to everything, it's like, oh, when that particular time was mentioned, or when this particular thing was just kind of slipped in there, it had a lot more meaning than originally you would think if you were just kind of flying through this book. But when you're like looking at it more closely and then you get to like different points in the book, you're like, oh shit, oh damn, she slipped that right in so subtly and so carefully that you wouldn't fucking notice it. Just brilliant little things like that is also really honestly really cool to look at when you are trying to figure out, well, how the hell can I be super subtle too? So yeah, I just really love this book. I feel like no movie ever gets it right. I feel like no one ever gets this right. Even when the movies get it, like the Kenneth Branagh one got a lot of elements of the book right, but the one thing that they still didn't get right, and it's the thing that no one ever fucking gets right, is Poirot. No one gets him right in any movie adaptations I have seen of this book. No one gets him right. And that pisses me off to no end. Ugh, but that's another discussion for another day. Anyway, I love this book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 stars. The other mystery I read that is also going to be in this upcoming video, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it either. It's The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This has been one of my favorite books. I was like 11 years old. It was my first official mystery book. And I say first official mystery book because it was like the first unconnected, official, brilliantly written mystery novel that was not fucking formulaic because it was Mary-Kate and Ashley New Adventures Mysteries or Wishbone Mysteries or Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. It was not formulaic, was not very simple. It was a slightly more complicated, more brilliantly written. Like, that's what I mean by first official, like, mystery novel. This bridges the gap between Nancy Drew and Agatha Christie for me, is this book right here. How do I explain this well enough? The Westing game opens with a group of people, a slightly diverse group of people, all receiving invitations or ads to move into this newly developed apartment building. And them all kind of moving in and settling in and getting to know each other. And about a month or so after they have moved into this apartment building, they are across the way from this old mansion, which is owned by this recluse who basically has built the town up and owns it and has like this huge paper company thing. It opens with the mansion suddenly looking not abandoned and a bet to sneak into the mansion and look around. And there within the mansion, the body of the very rich and reclusive Samuel Westing is found. And then all of these characters are then invited to the reading of the will, which involves them in a game. A fairly complicated game to figure out who is responsible for his death. And winner of the game will get like, I think it's like $1 million, I believe. $1 million or $2 million. It's a lot of money, especially for when this was set. This was set in like, this was published in 1978, so also a lot of big chunk of change for then too. And all of these people are kind of split into partnerships. And, oh man, you guys, it's so fucking brilliant. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to go totally in-depth about this because I'm going to get very in-depth and probably a little spoilery in that video, because I don't think I can really discuss this book in depth without spoiling things. Same goes for the other one. But again, brilliant mystery. Ending did something to me as a kid. Like the way this book ends, the details, the things, it did something in my brain as a child, and I don't think I can fully express what that was. It just blew blew my socks off. Brilliant, emotional, crazy book. This has so much humor in it, a lot of, again, social commentary. It's got like a very cleverly done kind of game of chess, carefully planned out game that this figure out who is responsible for the death of Samuel Westing. And it's just interesting. It has also, again, a lot of heart. It's chock full of flawed people who, despite these flaws and despite some of the things that they say or choices that they make, they are still deep down at the heart of them really decent people. And it's just to see, like, there's so many playing parts in here, but to see the little subtle like character growth moments or a thing, it's so brilliant, so great. And honestly, I admire this so much because there are a lot of characters to play with, and the way that Alan Raskin has managed to give you such solid impressions of people within not that long of a book, and again with all of these characters to flesh out. Like, my current writing project has a lot of people in it, and it is hard for me to right now fleshing people out and make them more than just like a pile of talking heads. So I really admire that too. And this is another thing that I again, the annotation, I'm really appreciating how this is written, how brilliant everything is, the little subtle details I was picking up on about this book, and also about how to properly write a fucking mystery. Just really brilliant. Again, there are some parts of this book that are kind of outdated, but still, for the time, there's also a couple of details and things said and aspects of the characters themselves, that were pretty, I think, kind of progressive, at least for the time period. And yeah, I think this is a brilliant middle grade book. It won an award. It deserves the award. It's so good. And I had a lovely time, probably as much of a lovely time reading this as an adult as I did when I was a kid. So I give this 5 stars, obviously. And then I read one sci-fi book in February, and that was Sidewinder by Marcella Haddad. And this is a book that is set in, I don't think it's really our world exactly. It might be. It is set in this very small, like, desert town. It starts right off the bat with shit is probably going down. It focuses on Seja. What is their last name? Seja Arantiha. Seja is a watcher. They are one of those who are tasked with, like, standing up on the battlements. The big, like, fort thing protecting their town. They're basically responsible for, like, being one of those people that keep an eye out, a watcher, like I said, to make sure that nothing is, like, coming. They keep an eye on who is arriving at the town, keep an eye out for things, you know? And these mysterious strangers kind of arrive at the town gates and warn that this, like, terrible prehistoric monster is basically going to come and devour their town, just like it had devoured another town further away. And it was coming, basically. So it's like to warn everybody about that. And there's also a lot that is going on in Seja's life as well. Like, Seja has, years before, lost their mother. Their mother has been sent away because of fortune-telling gifts. There's a lot of, like, kind of fortune-telling and religious discussions going on in here as well. They are kind of worrying about what is the right choice to make to protect their town. Do they listen to these people and evacuate for fear of a prehistoric monster? Do they stay put and believe that everything's going to be okay? Like, it's this big question, basically, of what is the right thing to do is a big part of this. It's a very short book, but there is so much packed into this book, and packed very well into it. It's not just this whole, like, town either. I mean, the town itself is very interesting, but, like, the world itself is also incredibly intriguing, and is chock full of really interesting characters. And honestly, I would love to see more of them. I'd like to see more of this town, or this world's system of towns. We get, like, tastes of what this world is like, but man, I would love to see more of it. Yeah, like I said, this is such a very quick book, but it packs a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of, like, discussion on, like, classism and religion, and there's a lot of commentary on, like, classism and religion, and it's just packed in here, but again, done so very well that it doesn't feel like it's not heavy-handed, it's not dense or anything. I mean, it's very short, but it's like, it doesn't feel like anything is forced. It's weaved in very carefully throughout this book. I really like the characters, and this is one of those books that made me just audibly react, which is not something that happens all the time. I think for the most part, unless a book is incredibly funny, you're not gonna really get a lot of reactions out of me. I think I'm a fairly quiet reader for the most part, unless, like I said, that some stuff's like incredibly funny, that you might hear a lot of laughter out of me. But like, for the most part, I don't think I tend to have a lot amount of reacting in my head, but not really audibly so that other people notice. But this book made me audibly react a couple of times. It's just, like I said, I really would love to see more of this world. I would really like to see more details, more of this world in general, get an even more in-depth look at this town. The town itself is called San Orgafi. Yeah, I would just love to see more of that. So Seja is kind of a little bit of a gunslinger. There was some action in here, but damn, did I want more. I think that's my only thing about this novella, is that, man, I wish it was a full-length novel, because I would love to see more of this world, and I would really like to see more action, because we got a small taste of gunslinging. Man, I would have loved to see so much more, because I think that was like my favorite part of the book in general. Yeah, really enjoyable. Also, local-ish author. Yeah, really enjoyed this. I give this 4 stars. And the last book that I read in February, and also the only fantasy novel I read, was Watermoon. And this is by Samantha Sato Yambao. The cover I have over here. I did destroy the cover, but you're supposed to, because this is... Okay, you need to look at this book for a second. Okay, look. It's supposed to look like this. This is the book, right? Beautiful. This is the inside of the book. See, you're supposed to fold the cover like origami. The unfortunate thing is, while I can do... The only origami I can do is a crane, and it's been so long I can't honestly remember how to fold it properly. But I am not good at following directions unless I'm watching someone do it. You can't just draw something and expect me to follow it. I have a problem. So I have fucked this up. I'm going to try to actually make it be what it's supposed to look like. I think it's supposed to like form a boat, but I can't get it to do it correctly. I don't know. If any of you also own this book and have figured out how to do that properly, please let me know, and let me know if someone said anything about how to do it properly, because your girl cannot figure it out. This book is following a young woman named Hana. She lives in a pawn shop. Now, at one point you might be like, wait, is this pawn shop in Tokyo? And you would be correct, but you would also not be correct. Basically, the pawn shop entrance does exist in Tokyo, Japan, in our reality. It exists, the opening portal to this pawn shop exists within a ramen shop in our reality. And it is only when someone needs it, whether they know it or not, that is when they will walk through the ramen shop door and they will find a pawn shop instead. Ta-da! The pawn shop itself both exists within Tokyo and outside of Tokyo. It exists within its own kind of reality. I feel like I'm not really explaining this that well. You would 100% understand more if you read the book, but I don't want to get into too many details because it probably spoils something without meaning to. It exists in Tokyo, but also doesn't exist in Tokyo. If it makes any sense at all. She has lived at the pawn shop her whole life. Her parents ran it before she was born. Her mother was lost when she was just a little baby, pretty much. And her dad has kind of continued to run the shop because that's his life's purpose, and also it runs in their family for them to be the caretakers of this pawn shop. So the book opens with Hana having just inherited the pawn shop. Her dad has decided he is going to retire, and he is passing it on to his daughter to run the place. Hana is both nervous about this. She's accepting the responsibility, but she's not 100% entirely on board with the responsibility. She's going to do it because that's her life's purpose and her path. But you kind of get the real sense that she kind of wishes maybe it wasn't so. This pawn shop is not your typical pawn shop. You're not going to walk in and find something like Pawn Stars where there's, anything from random junk to, I don't know, Elvis's old shoe or whatever the fuck. I haven't seen that show in years and whatever. But it's not like that typical kind of place. What is pawned here are people's regrets. The purpose and the regrets also serve another purpose because there is a darker tinge to this world as well. There are these particular creatures that require these regrets, and every so often they will come to collect them. And if they don't have the amount of regrets that should be there, like say for example someone has taken one or let it go, there will be hell to pay. So this opens, like I said, Hana has just basically inherited this shop, and she wakes up in the morning and finds that the shop is ransacked. A very big regret is missing, and her father is also missing. So she now is on a race against time to figure out what the hell happened and try to get this regret back so that, and put it back properly so that something terrible doesn't happen to her dad. In her haste to figure out what's going on, she ends up bumping into Kishin, who has just arrived back in Tokyo after having been away for many years. And he was just trying to go into a ramen shop, and boom, there he is within this alternate reality pawn shop. And he decides to help Hana on her journey, and yeah, this kind of a bonkers fantasy novel. It goes on from there, traveling throughout her reality to try to find her dad and the missing regret before these terrifying creatures track them down first. This book was an absolute fucking ride. I feel like I explained too much and also did not explain enough at all. This is one of those books where I feel like you have to read it to fully fucking grasp anything about it. I don't know if I'm selling this to you or not right now, but it really is such a wild ride. Very interesting world that felt like it kept kind of expanding throughout the chapters as they went along. There's a little bit of wibbly wobbly timey wimey in here. A lot of this world being kind of bonkers. Little pieces of, I think, lore or legends from Japan tossed in here, but don't quote me on that 100% because I don't know a ton of lore. Yeah, don't quote me on that exactly because I know a couple of cultural things, and because I recognized a couple of like cultural things and traditions kind of worked in, and I noticed something that looked like it sounded kind of similar to a fairy tale I remember reading years ago, but yeah, don't hold me to it entirely because I'm not 100% certain, but I felt like I was like pulling a lot of like interesting things about lore potentially in here, kind of yeah, having elements of that in there. It's a very fairy tale. I saw somebody refer to it online as like a very Studio Ghibli feel to it, which it does indeed have kind of that feel to the world in general. The stakes are high, and it's just a crazy wild ride jumping from pieces of this world to each other. The rules of the world are honestly a little confusing at times, I will say. Even though I said like it keeps expanding as the chapters go along, you're seeing different parts of this reality and how it is both a part of and separate from our own reality, which is very interesting, seeing like these different elements of it and different things that like affect our world, because this reality and our reality are affecting each other all the time, basically. It's very interesting. But even with that said, there were a couple of things that felt kind of overly complicated as I was reading this, or just there's a lot of stuff happening in here. There's a lot of twists and turns that this story takes. This is another one that I also audibly reacted to. There were a couple of points while reading this that I literally kind of pushed the book away from me and was like, holy shit. Which again is not something that I do that often with my reading. I don't usually audibly react that much to things. I couldn't help but root for the main characters, although to be completely honest, I found Keishan to be way more endearing and intriguing than I found Hana to be. I don't know why that was, but that's just kind of how I felt about things in general as I was reading this. There is a little bit of a love triangle aspect thing to this, and quite honestly, I don't know. I felt like the love aspect of this, the relationship was a little bit forced, and it was kind of like that insta-love feeling to it, which, I mean, had a little bit of like that kind of insta-love thing to it, which it's funny. Like, I can 100% talk shit about that, like, insta-love stuff all the time in books. It is honestly something that tends to bother me a bit more, I think, while I'm reading, which is entirely contradictory to how I am in with real life stories or with like movies or something. I love at first sight. I eat that shit the fuck up. Like I see that stuff in like a movie or something, or I hear somebody's story about that, and I just, oh my gosh, I am a squealing silly little high school girl about it. But like for some reason in books it tends to annoy me more. For some reason. I both enjoyed the relationship, but at the same time felt that certain elements of it were just a little bit too forced or a little bit too quick to be a thing, you know? It just felt a little bit too much, too fast, I guess, is really what I mean about this. There was some spice-ish things in here that I was 100% not expecting, because I thought this was like a YA. It's not full spice, it's just like little tastes of it. But still, wasn't expecting it. Not complaining though. Definitely not complaining. Was okay with the with what there was. It's not explicit or anything, so if you're worried about your teen reading it, don't be. Yeah, was not expecting it, but definitely okay with it. I really like the different things that were incorporated in this. This right here, I feel, is very interesting. It gives me, like, the 10th Kingdom vibes, if any of you were, like, fans of that miniseries. I fucking love that miniseries. It's giving that 10th Kingdom vibes, because, like, this, I think, is supposed to be Tokyo. And this is Hana's world. Very interesting book. Like I said, twists and turns. What a fucking ride this was. made me emotional at one point, so um but yeah, I honestly, so I did end up giving this like 4 stars, because this was such a fascinating world. And like I said, it just kind of kept expanding, and I was very invested in this. And the absolute twists and turns that this thing took just surprised the fuck out of me at one point. But I will say there were a couple of elements that I felt like maybe, like I said, the love stuff was maybe a little bit forced, and also it also kind of felt like maybe there was a lot going on in here, that there was almost too much going on in here. If that makes any sense at all. But still, very, very interesting. A really kind of cool world that she created here. I think she has a few other novels out, and I have never heard of her before. So I definitely want to check out her other novels, because like I said, this was a fucking ride. So yeah, 4 stars. So yeah, this was everything that I read. In February, I got, what, 6 books? So not that much, but you know what? The quality was primo. So that is ultimately what matters. That's everything I read. I hope you enjoy hearing about these. Let me know if you've read any of these books or what you particularly thought about them. I hope that you guys are having a great month, or trying to have a great month. I know if you're following me over on Instagram, I have been barely posting, and anything I post, I'm making it very clear that I've been fucking disassociating with music and writing. So yeah, I don't know what March's wrap up is going to look like, because I had a lot of books I wanted to read, and I have read 1, and I don't think it was even on my TBR, really, was it? I don't know. Yeah. But in other news, I have been getting a lot of writing done. And you know what? I will take that. I will take actually being productive and writing and enjoying the hell out of myself while I'm writing this particular project, than reading like 15 books or something. I'll take it. To be completely honest, it's been great, and it is a genre that I have never written in before. So also really fun and exciting. So on so far. Hope you're having a good one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please do so. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.